Hey, John.
Hey, what's up, Brian?
How's it going today?
It's going good, man. Lots going on in the head, but overall, still healthy. Everybody in my close circle is still good, and the sun's still shining out here in Orange County. How's it
That's,
going for you guys?
it's good. We're having our first nice weather. I've really nice weather. I went running yesterday in just a t-shirt. It's the first time I've gone running without a jacket or sweatshirt or something on for many months. So it's
Nice.
getting sunny. It feels a lot better. It's easy to feel positive when it's nice weather, good weather. It's sunny outside. You're able to go for a nice walk and just enjoy being outside. It's good. I know not many people can do a walk right now and can go out. That's maybe a luxury we have at this point, but yeah, I think it makes
Is
it
that is
much
that
easier.
because of these? Is that because of the situation in Japan? So, can you clarify? As far as like the shelter in place for you guys, are you guys allowed to go outside and do your thing, and but just is it but not really go venture too far, or like kind of what's the status of that for you guys over there?
Yeah, so they've declared an emergency in Japan, and they've recommended, I guess is the best word, that certain businesses close. I don't think there's any official law that says every business has to close. There are restaurants that are still open. There are like a lot of businesses seem to still be open, although I think a lot of people are choosing to maybe not go to the restaurant, right? The parks are open, but the playgrounds are roped off. So you can walk around in the grass and you can kick a soccer ball around, or you can like the other day my daughters went out and we flew a kite for a little bit. Like you can do those kind of things outside, but it's much lighter, I would say, than the shelter in place that I see in America or that my friends in Italy or something are going through, where it feels much more restricted in terms of what you're allowed to do in other places. For the most part, life is kind of normal, except they've strongly requested that people alter their behavior to be a little more isolated and a little more safe.
Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Well, in the beginning, I thought it was too weak, and I was very frustrated that they were not taking it seriously. And in retrospect, I think if here's the one part is like I don't know what to know. I don't know what the actual numbers are in Japan in terms of how many people are sick or how fast it's spreading, because they don't test a lot, so you don't really know. But
Yeah.
I think it feels like they maybe called it correctly to me at this point, and that they trusted the Japanese citizens would be extra careful and would practice really good hygiene and would do a lot to keep it from spreading out of control. I don't really know though. I feel like this whole coronavirus, one of the themes about it is that it's hard to know with anything with certainty, right? Like
Mm.
and that's because we're in uncharted waters, right? Like every country is different. If you look at the trends in every country, you see very similar behaviors, but you also see that each country has slightly different policies that they're following, and yet in some cases the results are the same. In some cases they're very different. Doctors are recommending certain things, but with a caveat that it's too early to know. There's so much they don't know about the disease. We've never had shutdowns like this at this level in a modern economy. So economists don't really know, how long we can handle it before we get to an irreversible impact on things. And, you know, for me, it creates this really strong situation of not having confidence in the facts. And all I really have available to me are sort of how I feel about it. I have my personal situation and what I think I can handle emotionally and financially versus what I can't handle. And then I have to sort of make some decisions on how I'm going to behave, right? What I'm going to do. And
Yeah, that's about it.
yeah,
I feel like I feel the same way. There's a lot of stuff that I don't quite understand about the whole situation, but at the same time, I know that this can't be everything that I'm thinking about. I can't be 100% consumed with COVID-19 news and thoughts about that, because things are always changing. And if you're not focused on, moving forward and focused on the present as it relates to preparing for things that you want to work towards and experience in your life at some point in the near future, you're going to miss out on the window of opportunity to have those experiences. So I kind of feel the same way that I don't really understand what to do. It's because the facts are always changing, and this is something we've never experienced before. But I don't want to get lost in it so much so that I lose myself, and that's something that, I've been thinking a lot about. And why, when we were talking about today's episode, I said, there's got to be experiences that we've all had in our lives, right? Where we've kind of felt this way to some extent, but it was more like our own worlds, our own lives, not necessarily like the rest of the world, even though, other people have maybe experienced, life-altering moments and situations. I'm like, gosh, I could think back to a couple moments in my life where I felt the way that I feel right now, like the way COVID-19 is making me feel. I felt this way when, I wanted to quit the UCLA track team. I felt this way when I was diagnosed with a terminal kidney disease. I felt this way when I truly fell in love for the first time. My world was changed forever in those moments. Kind of wanted to dive into it a little bit and share what those moments were for me personally, to help paint a little bit of a similarity to what I believe COVID-19 is doing to all of us on an emotional level. Like this, again, the facts we don't really know.
Yeah, yeah.
But emotionally, I think that we can unpack it enough to start to understand how it's going to influence the decisions that we make post-COVID-19. Because there will be a post-COVID-19. Now, I'm not saying it'll go away forever, but I'm saying that things will change and that there will be more opportunities to do more with your life, because the shelter in place and all this stuff, this can't last forever. It's going to change. It might look differently. It might be different. But what about you? That's my question to myself. What about you? Where are you going to be emotionally as things change? And are you aware of how this is changing you in terms of how you're feeling about it and the decisions you're going to make based on how you feel about it?
Yeah, I think what you hit on is really accurate. Like, no matter our situation, the COVID-19 coronavirus, pandemic, everything we're going through, it is a fundamental life-altering experience for everyone. And some of us, the actual lives are what we do on a daily basis might seem very similar post-coronavirus, but the world itself is going to change. Like there's going to be major changes that we can't entirely predict right now. In 30 or 40 years, we will have conversations like, what were you doing back when they had the coronavirus? Like, those conversations will happen, and we will live back in these memories, and we will remember sort of what we did and what we went through. It's going to be a signature moment in that sense. And I think you're right that a good way to put it in some sort of context is to think about other personal moments that we have, other life-changing moments that have affected our future after they occurred, and how we handled those. Because it is true that these things happen, in our lives. Like, we don't always have a global issue where everyone's feeling it simultaneously, but whether it's a slightly smaller, more at the country level, like we were talking previously at some point about, 9/11 affected Americans in a really strong way, even if it didn't affect the individual lives of Americans. I was in California. Like, 9/11 didn't actually, I was never at any risk like I am with coronavirus, but it still had a major impact on how I felt, and America as a country, and actually the world as a whole. But I think you're right that today, let's talk about some of the personal stories, because I think there's a lot more similarity than maybe we might naturally assume between something like a coronavirus pandemic and losing a loved one, in my case, or in your case, getting diagnosed with a kidney disease or something. Because the reality is, emotionally and psychologically, they can have a very similar impact on how you feel, because they throw a large amount of insecurity and uncertainty into your life at a point when maybe you're not as ready to handle that, to deal with it, and you're going to have to overcome that once that happens. So what happened at UCLA? Why was that a life-altering moment for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting period of time in my running career and in my life, because I think on the surface, it's really easy to look at it and go, okay, the running's not working out because of the injuries. I had seven stress fractures or reactions, a mix of the two. A fracture is obviously a full break in the bone, and reactions is a slight crack in the bone. But Either one hurts pretty bad, and it's quite debilitating from a running standpoint. It takes, 6, 8, sometimes 12 weeks to heal, depending on how bad of the break is. Well, I had 7 of those between my sophomore and my 4th year in college. I went to UCLA for 5 years, so I ended up, having a 5-year career at UCLA as a student athlete. But yeah, the thing that was interesting about that period in my life was when I got to the point where I recognized that I was losing myself in the ambition of being a great runner. And I had become so obsessed with wanting to be great at something. So that was my world, was being great at the running. And then the injuries started chipping away at it. I had some success as a freshman at UCLA. I won the junior national title. I was amongst the best juniors in the country. I made my first USA team as a junior USA team. And I got to travel and that summer after my freshman year, and I went overseas and competed for the first time. And so I had all these different experiences in the very beginning of my career that made me feel like I was on track, no pun intended, to achieve the kind of success that I was expecting to have. So the expectation definitely was setting myself up for disappointment, because no matter whether or not the expectation was met, there was going to be moments of challenges and obstacles that would make it hard for me to believe that it's going to work out. Like, my belief was going to be challenged by every obstacle that came up, because I wholeheartedly had this expectation that it was going to work out, especially after having that success.
Right.
So I go through my sophomore year, and the fractures, the stress reactions start. I didn't handle that very well. I worked very hard, when I was injured. I did all the things that, a high-level athlete should do while they're injured, which is just work harder, keep doing the work, do what you can do, even though you can't do everything you'd like to do. But it was all the stuff that I wanted to be able to do that really consumed my focus, and it was building up over the years from my sophomore, my junior, and then my senior year. By the time I got to that point where my running was just not where I wanted to be, I had very few moments of quote-unquote brilliance that I decided, and then I was showing up negatively on my team. And that was the part that bothered me the most in terms of like the situation. I'm on a team and I have these expectations to perform well. And the school to some extent had these expectations of me as well, even though I was not on a scholarship. I was on the team, so I was expected to contribute at a high level. But I was not only not performing well, I was kind of a jerk. I was not very fun to be around for the most part. I mean, I was a silly, goofy guy, and I don't think anybody would say I was necessarily mean, but I wasn't very happy.
Right.
And I felt a very good teammate for the most part. Very selfish. I was very self-centered, very focused on my success, and that's normal. But I got to the point where I was like, this is unacceptable. My running's not working out, and my attitude's terrible, and I'm not being very kind and supportive enough as I think a good teammate would be. So I got to the point where I told my coach that I quit.
Wow.
I just said, I'm going to walk away. That was one of the most important decisions I ever made in my life, because if I didn't quit, I don't think that I would have had the success that I ended up having in running.
So obviously you continued running, but what were you going to do? What was your plan at that time when you said when you quit?
I thought, because I still am, I'm very passionate about education, and I was like, well, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to graduate, go to graduate school, get my degree, and become my teaching credential and become a teacher.
Okay.
Teach. And I was just going to move on. I kind of had come to the conclusion that at that moment when I quit, and it was like the spring of my 4th year, so it was like the track season of my 4th year at UCLA. So I still had one more year of competition left if I wanted it, and cross country, indoor track and field, and outdoor track and field if I wanted it. But I told my coach, I said, I'm quitting. And, that was that. He said, well, okay, how about you just take 2 weeks off, think about it, just stay away from the team, just go do your own thing, keep training or whatever. But he says, come back to me at the end of the 2 weeks and let me know if that's still your decision. After about a week, I did a lot of long runs, running 10, 12 miles at a time out by down San Vicente Boulevard, along Ocean Boulevard, beautiful part of
Mm-hmm.
Southern California, man. I mean, probably the most beautiful part of that, one of the most beautiful places for sure in the world. And, it's the springtime, so it's a beautiful time to be outside. And I just had all this time alone, and I would just go on these long runs, wasn't worried about pacing or anything. I was just running. I was healthy, but mentally I was struggling. Emotionally, I was struggling. And, I was very religious at the time. So I was like mad at God
Mm-hmm.
and questioning God. And I was like, hey, you give me all this talent and you give me all these injuries too. I'm like, what's the deal? Am I not supposed to be great at this sport? Am I not supposed to be one of the best in the world? Am I not supposed to be an Olympian? I mean, you gave me all these things and then you give me all these injuries. What's the deal? And then, so I was asking all these questions on these runs, these 10, 12-mile runs. And I was running just slow but long, long. I'd be out there for like 2 hours, and just do my own thing after my classes. I'd just go for a run. And after about a week, I don't know if I prompted the meeting or if Coach Peterson prompted it, but he's like, hey, I want to check in with you, see how you're doing. And I had already made the decision, like for sure, I was going to quit. I knew that I was already happier just out enjoying the running. I said, when I asked all those questions to God and I was just like, well, why? The thing that became very clear to me was the only reason why you started running in the first place, like the main reason, not the only reason, but the main reason, is because you love it. It makes you happy. And I was out there running and I was enjoying it. And I was like, wow, I forgot about how much I loved to run, period. I was so focused on the expectation of being great and the desire to win at the highest level that I totally forgot that I loved to run. I just loved running. That I quit basketball, a sport that I had played for 10 years, my entire childhood, and quit it at the age of 14 for a brand new sport that I had barely even known because of how it made me feel. And I've forgotten that. So I said, I'm going to go back to that. I'm just going to go back to that. I'm not worried about, these dreams anymore of becoming an Olympian or whatever. I'm going to quit. And then I did. And so when I met with Peterson, he thought I was just going to say, yeah, I'm cool, because I seemed happier again. I seemed like I was like, yo, I'm good. I was like, man, it's been a week. I'm like, I got so much work to do in my head, my own head. I was like, I'm happy, but I'm not there. And I said, I'm still going to quit. And he was shocked. He was like, no, I can't let you quit. I still believe you're going to be one of the best milers in the world. I want you to continue. And I said, the only way I'd stay on the team and compete is if we throw out the expectations. I don't care about times. I don't care about championships. I don't care about anything other than being a good teammate and just doing the work. I said, I'll come back if you can just let me be. And he said, okay. So I did. And I basically, it was like hitting the reset button. I got the reset. It was an important lesson for me in that moment because, long story short, I ended up not only making the NCAA championships that year for the first time, winning a Pac-10 championship, a Pac-10 title, I think I did. I got pretty close. I think I was top. I don't know. I did really well in the Pac-10 championships. I think I may have won a title, individual title, or got really close to it. I can't remember. I know I did my fifth year, but my fourth year, I don't remember. But I did really well in Pac-10s. I did really well at regionals. I qualified for nationals. I didn't do great at nationals, but I qualified. And then I actually ended up like a week or two later, they go to Texas. Right when I decided to quit, we go back, and I run like a 4-minute mile on the DMR leg at the Texas relays, and I had barely really been doing any speed work. But I'm like, my attitude, my energy, everything was different. I had let go of all of that baggage of expectation. And I think that that's an important thing for me as I think about COVID-19, that story of quitting, of building all this stuff up. I think we do that with our lives. I think we go, oh my gosh, everything has to be a certain way. I want this to be a certain way. We start to have these things built up in our head, these stories and these expectations. And then something comes along and bursts our bubble.
Hmm.
And then we go, now what do I do? You know, and the idea of quitting, starting over, slowing down, stepping back, when we're in this rat race, it's really, really hard to do that because we're just trying to keep up, plus do that thing, that we really want, or start working towards that thing that we really want, which is the goals and dreams, the passions, the hobbies that we really have for our lives that we really, really would rather do. Even if it was for free, we would do it if we could afford to do it because it just makes us feel that good. But we get caught up in life and it's hard to stop and look at it unless something comes along and does that for you. The injuries did that for me, and quitting did that for me. I think COVID-19 is doing that for all of us, or at least is going to put us in a position to do that. Look at your life and really look at every aspect of your life, from your relationships to the work you've been doing, the job that you have, the career that you have, to the things you've been putting off and the dreams that you've been dreaming about but doing nothing about. What are you going to do about it now? And is COVID-19 inspiring you to really do something about it and not give up the time that you do have to do something about it? Or is it scaring you to the point where you're hesitant to do anything? This is a defining moment, I think. It's almost like me quitting the sport that I ended up becoming one of the best in the world at. Right after I quit, like fully quit, I was done. And that emotional state of being is what freed me to be great. And I'm wondering if COVID-19 can do that for us, because that's how I feel about that story. It makes me think about how COVID-19 makes me feel, and it feels a lot like that moment.
So it does. You feel like this experience you're going through with COVID-19, in the same way, it's creating a sort of a reset moment for you on some of these areas of your
I
life.
recognize it as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. I think on the surface, the coronavirus situation, COVID-19, global pandemic, it doesn't really have any similarity to sort of injuries in track and field and stuff. But I find it's really thought provoking to me that you do have a strong connection, that you do see a strong connection between the two, because you had you learned something about yourself in terms of how you were able to get through that injury experience, and the fact that you're able to take from that experience and apply it to your current experience now, and use it to help make this experience better, I think is really important. I think one of the things I like to joke about with when I talk about, you want to be the best or you want to win the bigger race or something, like most people don't get a lot of opportunities, let's say, to win a gold medal. You don't get a lot of opportunities to run in an Olympic championship final. They come around once every 4 years, right? There's a small list of people who've competed in more than one. If you get in one, there's a good chance that's the only one you're ever going to be in. And if you're going to win the gold medal, you're going to have to do it then. And you're going to have to do it in the time that you've never had an opportunity to do it before, right? So that's a very, I'm going back to, I'm reaching to track and field, but in the same way, like, we're going through a global pandemic right now. There's a good chance that we won't go through another global pandemic.
Not in our lifetimes.
Not in our lifetimes, right? It could happen, but there's a good chance that it won't. And so how we go through this, we have to draw from our other experiences in order to try to make the most out of how we process this experience and how we get through it.
Right. No, and that's what how I look at the COVID-19 situation. Like, I don't want to downplay the health concerns of it at all, because there are real health concerns. People are dying from it, and it's really scary in that regard. But just like I got caught up with the expectation of success, I'm like, what expectations are we caught up in with regards to COVID-19? There's hard to have any really at this point, other than getting to the truth, and who knows when that's going to happen, And I feel like that's where we can get into a lot of trouble, is becoming very hesitant to make any decisions that are meaningful and that aren't based on fear.
Well, and there's this idea of the expectations you have are what's determining how happy you are and how successful you feel, right? One of the things that stood out to me is that you had such high expectations, and you had reason to believe that, based off of your development as you were younger, that these expectations were possible. and you were constantly being held back. And in your case, it was the injuries, but it was letting go of some of those expectations and focusing on the activity. I don't know, like you, as you put it, just the enjoyment of running, and just and getting rid of the idea that you're supposed to be achieving at a certain level, and just focusing on what you can do in the moment to do the best at what you're trying to do. I think you put it as just no expectations and do the work, right? Enjoy doing the
Right.
work. Something like our situation right now, every business, every person is out there trying to figure out if the ideas that they had for their lives in the past, or the path that they thought they were on, is still a viable path, right? Is it still, is that path still there at all? But even if it is, what is the likelihood that that path is going to stay the same? And then there's the other side of it, is you've been on this path. Is this really the path you want to be on, right? This is the journey you've been taking. But as you said, in the case of many people, there's a lot of people who have very clear ideas for what they would like their life to be, but they're not really pursuing them. For sometimes those reasons are outside their control, and sometimes those reasons are totally in their control, and it's just about taking the first step and making the commitment to do it.
I like that last question. Is the path that you're on really the path that you want to be on? And right now, again, just like that moment where I made the decision. So I was so frustrated with all the stress fractures and reactions that I was having. I'm like, obviously this isn't meant to be, right? Because come on, you got 7 at some point. I got to get it through my head that my body does not want to do this thing. That's what I was being told. And, I think there's a lot of, we could talk about it from metaphysical standpoint, that maybe I was somehow manifesting these injuries, emotionally, and they were showing up physically. I mean, if you believe in that, that could be a way to look at it as well. But for the most part, I had to look at it and go, wait a minute, how bad do I really want this? Am I on the right path? Maybe I should be doing something else. It's time to move on and begin the retrospective reflection of, well, what did I learn from the experience? Because it's now over. And begin that process, because at some point you do want to look at what you've gone through and try to learn from it to do more with your life and have different experiences, because you're not repeating the same one that you just had because you didn't take the time to reflect on it. So either way, when you have these moments like this one right now, for sure, this is a moment to ask yourself, am I on the right path that I really want to be on? How long have I been on the wrong path? If I've been on the wrong path, and what am I going to do about it now, irregardless of COVID-19? Because that's one thing. You got to put it in its own box. There's COVID-19, and then there's your dreams, your goals, and your life, and what you want out of it. Before COVID-19, that was still a thing. COVID-19 could be honestly any challenge or obstacle or problem, and can become a distraction from that other thing, which is your life and what you want to get out of it. And at some point you have to, at certain points in your life, you need to take the time to look at it and go, well, am I where I want to be? And if I'm not, what am I going to do about it? And it's very hard to have those moments. Right now we're reflecting on those moments for ourselves. I want to hear more about your story. And you said, your father's passing and how that was a big deal, a moment for you of reflection where you kind of where you made decisions. Or at least we're at a unique point in your life to make decisions, certain decisions that have impacted your life now looking back. But I think this is another one of those moments. This is a moment like this for sure in all of our lives. And that's the challenge that I want to put out there. And I'm sure we're doing it, but I want to say it. Like, re-examine your life and use this moment as an opportunity to pivot. Because this is that opportunity. Clearly it is. And how you feel is going to determine the impact, or it's going to determine the decisions that you make, and whether or not those decisions can help you get closer towards the life that you really want to be living if you weren't living that life before. So pay attention to how you're feeling and realize that you want to make decisions based on the outcomes that you want to have 5 to 10 years from now. Because I really do believe this is a moment where whatever decisions you make, it's going to influence whether or not you can achieve the goals and dreams that you have.
I want to give it a slightly different frame. What you're saying, what I think this moment is a great moment to reevaluate your priorities, because whatever decision you're going to make should be based off of your core priorities for your life. And a lot of us in our lives, we go through a period where we go down a path, and that path we go down that path because doors opened and because things happen the way they do. And you can just imagine you're just started walking along, and it's like, well, this road is the road on the side is a little bit rougher, so we choose the smoother path or something. But we're not making the decision based off of our priorities. There's this kind of idea, I don't know the right framing for it, but your priority stack or something. What is your top priority, and what's your next priority, and what's your third priority in terms of your life? It's an exercise that not many people do, and I'm guilty of not doing it really, really strongly, right? But everything you're saying, the idea of the coronavirus as a time to pivot, it's not a time to pivot if the path you are on is aligned to your priorities. If the path you are on is aligned completely with your priorities, and it's exactly where you want to be, and the coronavirus is just delaying you, then that's fine. We just have to navigate this time and stay on the path. And when I hear your story, I think of somebody who you had high expectations, you anticipated and expected to become an elite athlete, you had a ton of injuries, and you hit a point where you were very, very frustrated and were deciding to quit. And when you quit, you went through a process of evaluating your priorities. And one of your priorities, you kind of realized one of your top priorities was you really loved running and you enjoyed doing the work of running. And it was really the expectations that were creating your frustration. So what you did is you removed the expectations and you focused on the priority that you had, which was doing the best you could do and enjoying it. And it sort of freed you to stay on the path of trying to become an elite runner without the frustration that you were experiencing before, right? And it was the evaluation of your priorities and resetting your priorities and realigning with Coach Peterson to say, no, these are my priorities, and I will do it under these circumstances, right? Under these conditions, I will continue training. But expectations and all this other stuff, that's not one of my priorities, and I'm not going to put my mental energy into it anymore. And the funny thing is, the story that comes to mind for me is leaving Apple, actually. I had a couple different cases at Apple where I made decisions based off of my priorities that were very difficult decisions for me. But my wife and so I was living and working in Cupertino first, and we wanted to live in Europe. Primarily we wanted to try to live in Italy. That was one of our goals. And it was largely my wife's goal. It was one of her dreams was to live in Italy. And it was something she wanted to do since she was little. But we were living in California, and we were trying to decide what to do. And I had an opportunity to go to London, and it was for slightly less pay. It was for slightly less, it was like a lateral move, but not even, it wasn't like a promotion. It wasn't anything. I was kind of giving a number of things up, and I was giving up opportunities in Cupertino that would have been probably really strong for me in order to go to London. But it more closely aligned to our overall dream, or not our overall dream, but our overall priorities we wanted to prioritize our experiences more than, for example, salary or savings or something, right? We wanted to prioritize opportunities to see the world and to travel and to do different things and have these experiences. And so we made the decision to go to London. And then when we were in London, it was a great experience for me from a work perspective. I really loved who I worked with, and I loved that experience. But we still had a top priority of trying to live in Italy. And London wasn't really the best experience for my wife in terms of how she experienced it, being at home with two little kids and kind of, not the best weather usually, and sort of being, I'm sort of interacting with people at work every day. And I've got this great network of support network and friends and all these people. And she was kind of a little more isolated and struggled to enjoy her experience there. And it came to a point where we decided, do we want to make this Italy dream happen? We're really close and we could do it from here. Like, we're in a position we could do it right now. Or do we want to stay on the path that we're on, where I'm making good money and I have a good salary, and we just stay on that path because it's a safer path. It's the financially stable path, whatever. And we had a lot of discussions, and we really decided that, well, if our top priority is pursuing some of these other experiences, and if the path that we're on is not clearly the path that we were sort of meant to be on, like I didn't feel very strongly that staying at Apple was critical to like how I defined who I wanted to be, or it was clearly the right path for me to be on. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that's when we decided, okay, I'm going to leave, and we're going to go do this other thing, and we'll figure out the rest of it. But we're going to make the decisions based off of our priorities. it wasn't driven by a pandemic. It wasn't driven by any particular hardship, except I suppose a little bit on my wife's part. But it was driven by a fork in the road, sort of, in that you have your priorities, and one path allows you to follow what you've stated your priorities are, and what you believe your priorities are, and the other path doesn't. We decided in that moment to take the path that allowed us to pursue those priorities. That moment was a very defining moment for me. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is because this situation we're in now forces us to make similar decisions. It's making us make those decisions right now because it's just here.
It at least gives you the freedom. One of the things we love to say is give yourself the permission to dream.
Yes.
And I feel like one of the things that holds us back is we don't feel like we have the permission to think about something or work on something outside of our priorities, our have-tos,
Yep.
Like I have to go to work. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to pay my bills, right? And once you get through all your have-tos, you're too tired to even think about, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I dream of doing, and I'm going to work on that, right? And I feel like you guys somehow were able to find a way to give yourself the permission to pursue that dream, and you did it. And yeah, it didn't necessarily take a pandemic, right, or something super traumatic, but we were talking earlier, and I was saying that COVID-19, a global pandemic, is too obvious of a life-altering event. It's too big to say, like, it takes something like this to have those moments. Our stories, I believe, help put it into perspective that there are many life-altering moments that are not as obvious as a pandemic that have the same implications as far as a moment in your life where you can make a decision, where there's a fork in the road, where you can give yourself the permission to choose a different path. This is just a really obvious one, but there have been many moments like this in all of our lives. And did you make that choice? And reflecting on that is important now because this is an obvious moment where you get to make that choice. And it's important to make those pivots when you have a chance to do it. And you guys did it. And I'm impressed because it doesn't sound like it was super, super obvious, but it was. Looking back at it, as you describe it, I'm like, that sounds like clearly you were at a pivotal moment in your life where you needed to make that decision, or it was not going to ever happen.
I think that's true. If we hadn't made the decision then, I don't know what we would have done, but there's a good chance it wouldn't have happened. And I think the other side of it is making the decision did sort of two things. One is it reaffirmed that I have both the ability and the strength internally to make a decision that is based on my priorities, and I'm not going to just pursue whatever the path is because it's what most people would pursue, or because it's the quote unquote safe route or something like that. It helped reaffirm for myself that I am a person who is going to live a priority driven life. And that's how I'm going to make my decisions. And it was much easier to do because my wife believes the same way. Right. So we supported each other in that decision. But the second thing is it gave me sort of peace of mind that even if it didn't work out, that I was making the decision for a reasonable, acceptable. The decision was made under the right circumstances, for the right reasons. Not there's risk with everything, and you have to you calculate that risk, and you make a guess as to whether what you're doing is going to work out or not. And I feel like basing the core decision of what we were doing off of our priorities and talking about them very clearly in those terms allows me to feel like, yeah, I gave up a lot in doing it, but I'm okay with that, because in the moment when I was making the decision, it was very clear that what I was giving up was lower priority than what I hoped to gain. Right. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to your permission statement, like knowing that that's how I came to the decision and that's why I made the decision. It kind of gives me the permission to not regret like what I missed out on.
Just out of curiosity, it's kind of amazing that you got to work at Apple. I mean, I think a lot of people would be curious to know what it's really like to work for like an Apple or a Google or Microsoft. Was it really cool? Was it what you expected? And would you ever work there again?
So working at Apple was it really was great actually in many respects. I grew a lot in working there, and I think this is probably true for every major, really, really big company, is that probably
Yeah.
your experience is very department centric. Like Apple is so big that I'm sure the people who work
Mm.
in marketing have a very different experience from the people who work in iTunes or who work in my case, in operations or in sales finance and some of these things. So I don't want to make it sound like my experience was universal, but it was a very high stress environment in the department that I was in originally. I should say I had two experiences. When I was working in operations, it was very high stress and very, very demanding. And I feel like there was a lot of pressure to perform as perfectly as you can perform, and to hold yourself, I don't know, to a standard that was very difficult to consistently achieve. And I went to Europe, and the environment was just very, very different. And everybody worked at a very high standard there too, but there was somehow the environment was different. It felt less stressful. It felt a little bit more free. I felt like I had more control over my direct experience and what I was working on, and what I was doing. That might just be the personalities of the managers that I had in those moments. But working in these big companies, the benefits are that you work with really, really smart people who are really committed to what they're doing. They're fully engaged. They push you, and you push them, and everybody gets better as a result. And one of the downsides is that you're often working on something that the specific thing that you need to work on might have no connection to what you as an individual, what you want to be doing with your life. It's sort of, you're doing it because that's the role you're in this moment, and that's the requirement of the role. And if you spend a lot of days in a row, or months, or in some cases years, doing work that is not totally aligned to who you want to be, that can sort of wear on you. And that's why a lot of people who are in that environment might choose to leave. It's not because they don't like the people they work with or who they're working with. It's because it just, at a certain point, they realize that there's different opportunities that fulfill them in a different way. And that was sort of my case. I was actually very happy in the work. I really was good at what I was doing, and I think I had potential to move up a little bit in the organization. I was never going to be, one of the senior management. I wasn't a goal of mine to ever even pursue it. But to work on cool projects, to work with cool people on those projects, all of that was in my direct immediate path, and I really enjoyed it. And so the decision to leave was actually quite difficult, because I was very happy in the job, and I was giving up something that I really enjoyed in order to pursue the opportunity to go to Italy and live there. But again, that's one of those things where you have to make those decisions at some point in your life on what you're going to do. Sometimes the decision is prioritizing two good things and choosing which one you think is better, and sometimes the priority is choosing which is the least worst. And in my case, my decision to go to Italy was I didn't feel like I was giving up a bad thing. I felt like I had two good opportunities, and I chose the one that aligned more with my priorities in the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's why I think that what's so interesting about having a job at a place like Apple is that it's a dream job. It's a dream opportunity, but it's not necessarily like the final destination. But you don't realize that until you get there. And I think that that's what it's like for a lot of the goals and dreams that we have, is that you got to keep working towards other things. And I think that you got to seek out those moments when you can make the pivots, and say, okay, I got as much as I could get out of this situation. I mean, and Apple's super cool. And it's like, in a lot of ways, it's like, why would I quit Apple, or why would I quit any really great job at a big corporation that's well known like Apple? It's for the same reason that you would quit something that's not working for you. At some point, even when it's great, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you stop, because maybe you're not growing anymore. Maybe you've outgrown that opportunity, and maybe there's a change that's required in order for you to actually expand way beyond that specific horizon than you ever imagined, even though that may have been an end goal. And obviously that's where the smart thing, right, is to, quote unquote, smart thing is to hang your hat at a place like Apple, especially if you can make that happen. it'd be kind of crazy to quit that job. But at the same time, what's even crazier is continuing to do the same thing, knowing in your heart that you might want something different and that you're expecting and hoping something different will come, while doing the same thing again and again and again, staying in the same situation, staying in the same circumstances, working with the same people year after year after year. That's more likely than not, that's not going to lead to the thing that you ultimately feel you want and desire. Even though quitting is a scary proposition, the alternative is scarier to me if you think about how you're going to feel 5, 10, 15 years from now if you didn't make that decision, because there's going to be a lot more regret from what ifs that you never answered. I like the fact that you do share that story. I think that it's very relevant as well, because a lot of people probably do have really great jobs right now. And if they still have those jobs and they didn't get laid off due to COVID-19, why in the world would they quit those jobs now? Definitely not saying doing that. I'm not advocating for that, but what I am advocating for is contemplation based on the circumstances. Real honest contemplation. At least can get to the point where you can see very clearly your situation for what it really is. I think this moment in history allows for that type of reflection, and it's something that I think you need to honestly do. You need to put in that work, because if you don't, I think you're missing out on being able to maximize the experience that you really want to have in life right now. And that's where everything that we talk about at Go Be More comes from. It's ultimately trying to help people unpack the true essence of who they are, and to live out the story that they want to experience in their lifetime, for themselves. Like, what is that story? What does it look like? And if you don't make changes and take opportunities to make changes, not based on fear, but based on love and passion and ambition and honesty to who you really are, I think you're missing out on the thing that you ultimately know you're going to wish you had before your life is over, which is, I went after some of the stuff that I really wanted in my life. And my hope is that each of us, because I'm in the same boat,
Yep.
that each of us takes a moment and just says, hey, how is this situation making me feel right now? And how is that impacting the way that I think about my dreams? And what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do to align myself with decisions that align with my dreams, irregardless of COVID-19 and irregardless of how scary it is? I need to separate that fear and that concern, that high level of anxiety that I have about that, from what it is that I really, really want out of my life. That's my hope.
I can't really add much to it. I totally agree. I think everybody having an understanding of what your priorities are, where you want to be and where you want to be headed with your life, and how you need to change, because change is inevitable as part of this, is how you need to change in order to get to where you want to go. Once you accept that there's some changes is a key part of it, and once you accept that change is not going to have, you're not going to have 100% certainty that it's going to work. You're not going to know that everything's going to work out. But if you can focus your efforts on what you sort of know in your heart is the right priorities for you, the thing that you are sort of, you feel strongly that you're meant to be doing, at that point, you can go forward and do it without regret and really be proactive about getting the most out of the situation that you're in. And in this case, it's utilizing your time as wisely as you can in order to make progress and set yourself up to come out stronger from when this pandemic is over. As you go forward, it'll flip, and the way you handled this pandemic experience is going to help to give you the strength to handle the next things that come, the next key decisions and the next key challenges that you have to overcome. This is a great opportunity to develop that mindset of navigating these challenges as effectively as possible. And then you take that with you for the rest of your life and apply it as these challenges come up again in the future.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Jon, I think we'll end it here. at some point in the future, we'll talk about some of these other stories I think we have. But I think it's great to keep these at about this time limit for our podcasts. Any last things you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just everybody stay strong. You know, we're in this together. I hope we can keep coming together as one and encouraging one another. No matter what negativity you see out there, find a way to go be more. You know, find a way to rise above it. Find a way to stay focused on the positive. Do whatever you need to do to stay optimistic, because there's a lot in your life to stay optimistic about. And those are the things that you need to stay focused on. Always choose love over fear.
Thank you, Jon. Everybody, you can find the links to any articles or references that we discussed in the show notes. You can find links to our website, to our YouTube channel, to give us feedback. You can like and subscribe to us on iTunes and other podcast players. They're all listed in the show notes. Please send us any feedback you have. For Jon, I'm Bryan. We are what the world is chasing, and we hope this podcast helps you become what the world is chasing too.